Good afternoon, welcome to the Pink and Matchday vlog. My name is Connor Southwell. Football's back after the winter break, although for me it wasn't quite the winter break I anticipated. I was off to Birmingham last week to go and watch Norwich City new boy Sam McCallum. Of course, the video of which you can see on our channel now. And of course today is an interesting game given Norwich City's opponents. They're of course facing Liverpool, league leaders, European champions, world champions. Daniel Farke described them as the best team, potential to be the best team in history, providing they go on and hit the records that they do. If I just spin around here, you'll be able to see all the people waiting for the respective coaches to come in, to see the players. It does feel like a massive task. Obviously this is a Liverpool side who haven't lost in the Premier League since January 2019. They have a lot of points on the board, 55 more than Norwich prior to kick-off. 22-point lead, of course, over Manchester City, who themselves yesterday got into some financial issues with UEFA, which means that it doesn't look like they're going to be able to play in the Champions League next season. But yes, how do Norwich cope with this Liverpool team? What challenges can they pose? What questions can they ask? We'll see. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, still lingering among some people's minds is that September victory over Manchester City, where the weather was considerably warmer than this, and we certainly didn't have Storm Dennis to contend with, which, as far as we're aware, hasn't put this game in doubt as of yet, which is good news. And yeah, as we say, it's now Norwich's turn to pose some questions of the champions-elect Liverpool, and let's see how they get on, because this is what you get promoted for. These are the games you get promoted for. This is what you want to put yourselves up against in the Premier League, and now Norwich have got that opportunity to do that at their home stadium in front of their home fans. It's going to be a brilliant occasion, I'm sure. It's going to be a great atmosphere, and it's all going to come down to if Norwich City can keep themselves in the game, for how long they can keep themselves in the game, and equally whether they can pose the questions they need to. Welcome to Carrow Road. Storm Dennis is beginning to make his way through this place, but nevertheless, hopefully he can hear me. I'm lucky to be under a roof. I fear for those people in the front rows of the Upper Barclay and areas of the stadium today that are exposed, because I came out just down in that corner, which is where we sort of come out. You can certainly feel the rain and the wind begin to hit you. The time is about 4 minutes to 4, so nearly an hour and a half to go until kick-off. Excitement building definitely around Carrow Road. As I walked round, it was quite palpable that some Norwich fans certainly fancy this today. It's evidently going to be difficult. Who knows, the conditions could be a leveller. They could work in Norwich's favour, they could work in Liverpool's favour. You just don't know. One thing is for sure, this is going to be an exciting proposition for Norwich City. What an occasion for them to host a team who are certain to become Premier League champions, maybe even European champions as well, and to try and hold their own and to try and compete. And it's going to be an interesting occasion to see how they get on today and see how they do adapt and make approaches. I've been told that the press area today is so busy, probably because of Liverpool's brilliance, and equally because of the lack of other Premier League games elsewhere. But it's so busy that some members of the press are actually having to watch the game in the press room on the TV as opposed to actually in the press box. So I feel very privileged that I've got one of these lovely padded green seats to sit on and to consume. And you may be able to see now the rain is beginning to come down. Hour and a half to go till kick-off. At the moment, weather conditions are playable. Let's hope that doesn't drastically alter before 5:30 this evening. Just to give you a scale of the press presence tonight, there is match of the day's Gary Lineker down there. So it just goes to show, and you may be able to see various other TV outlets along this touchline. There's one in that corner, and there's also one down in that corner as well. Yeah, run up there as well. There you go. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to see that when you watch Match of the Day later this season. 40 years ago, that Chesterton Factory strike against Liverpool, down that end in the River End. And there is the banner in tribute to the former Norwich City striker. Lovely, lovely touch from the Norwich City fans. Half time here at Carrow Road, the score Norwich City 0, Liverpool 0. Not been a great watch, to be honest, but Norwich won't mind that, because what they've done and how they've tried to control and retain and restrain Liverpool from attacking phases of play has been quite impressive. Maybe you could accuse them of being a little bit too narrow at times and a little bit last ditch at points in certain phases, but they have cut off the supply line quite well, and that's a credit to them that this game is going in the fashion it is, because they've really restricted Liverpool to anything. I'm struggling to really recall a time where Tim Krul's been worked. In fact, I don't think he has. I'm sure if you delved into the XG statistics and the shots on target statistics for both sides, in fairness, they wouldn't be too great. You could argue Norwich perhaps had one of the better opportunities of the game when Kenny McLean played in Lucas Rook. He's on his left foot, just needs to try and loft it over Alisson Becker, or just try and unleash a shot. Instead he tries to be clever and just square it to Timu Puki, who would have had a tap in, but Alisson pulls it away. That's the closest Norwich have come. Alexander-Arnold's shot after 13-14 seconds, probably the closest Liverpool have come. But the big challenge now for this Norwich City team is, can they keep doing what they've done in this first half for another 45? That's going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to cause a strain on them mentally, but it's a big test. Liverpool surely have to come out and be a little bit better than they have been in that first half, but let's see how it transpires, because if Norwich City can hold in there then and replicate that level of performance to a man, then there's certainly a chance, and probably a very slim chance, because Liverpool only need a moment, they only need an inch. But if they can continue what they've been doing, there is an opportunity that they could extract some points, which would be massive. I've seen a few people suggest that a draw wouldn't be a great result for Norwich City. I think, considering the level of the opponent, considering all they've achieved this year, that would be an incredible result, something they could take confidence from. But hey, we've got 45 minutes of football left to play yet, and Liverpool could still come out and trounce them. This is about concentration, this is about application now, this is about how determined and how dogged they are to continue that defensive shape, because what we've seen in that first 45 is they've really posed big problems with Liverpool from a defensive perspective, and Liverpool are yet to really knock through that door with the same confidence and with the same routine, in the same routine nature that we've seen many times in the Premier League this season. So far so good.
Take boys played really well yesterday. I think, coming up against the front runners Liverpool, it's such a big challenge, and I think they should definitely be very proud of themselves because I thought they put on a great show. I think Grant Hanley, Tim Krul with that double save, just immense. Kenny McLean had a really great game as well. And so, I think we were really unlucky to concede. I thought they should be proud of themselves. They played really well. It's a real shame that Sam Barham got injured, but I enjoyed seeing Jamal Lewis back. He's definitely my preferred player for that position, and I thought he had a really good game once he came on. The only thing I would say as well is that I think definitely during the second half, we just weren't quick enough on the break. And although Todd had a really good game, I think we would have appreciated someone like O'Neill coming on, where, you've got his speed, you've got his strength, and I think it would have helped us create more chances. I also think Emmy isn't a good sub. I think you either need to play him from the beginning or not play him at all, because I don't think he really gets to get into his rhythm when he only has 10 minutes left. So I think, I just don't think he's a good sub. I think he needs to be starting. But on the whole, I think we were really unlucky not to get a point, because I think the boys played really well, and I think that there are a lot of positives for us to take moving forward into our next games.
Welcome to Carrow Road. Norwich City beaten 1-0 by, I think we can say now, Premier League winners, or eventual Premier League winners Liverpool, who have established a 25-point gap here tonight by beating Norwich City. But my goodness me, did they have to work for it. Norwich City will probably... Look, Liverpool were the better side. They just deserved all 3 points, I think, over the piece. But Norwich City have, and look, they won't take any comfort from this tonight, but I think in the days that follow they'll analyse it and reflect on it quite positively. Have gone over 100 minutes. If you combine the second half of the game at Anfield and the 78 minutes tonight, keeping Liverpool at bay, which is a record that I don't think many teams will have matched this season, off the top of my head. But Norwich City, first half made it a very dull game, and that is probably the biggest praise you can give them, really, when you think about some of the instigators of Liverpool's creative play and some of their attacking outlets. Norwich City really limited them to pretty much nothing. I mean, Firmino had a shot blocked. Alexander-Arnold had a shot after 13 seconds, and that everyone thought that would sort of set the tone, but ultimately it didn't. And they were defensively quite good. I think you could probably accuse them of being a little bit too narrow at times, but they did prevent Liverpool from playing through the lines, and Liverpool didn't really show an urgency or a willingness to play through Norwich's defensive shape. And I'm not sure if that's because of the weather, and that meant that they were forced into more diagonal passes because they felt they would carry a bit more than perhaps the risk that was involved in playing through the lines, or whether it was Norwich City's good defending. And I think we have to give the Canaries the benefit of the doubt tonight as I battle against Storm Dennis outside in Carrow Road. Hopefully you can just about still hear me, but that first half really was about Norwich City cutting off channels, working hard, showing graft, and really limiting Liverpool to not a lot of chances, which is a good going, really, when you consider Mo Salah and Roberto Firmino were in the side, as well as Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and the midfield three, Wijnaldum, Henderson. They ooze quality, Liverpool, and Norwich City did really restrict them to very little. And Liverpool had prolonged possession and they probed with intent, but in terms of clear-cut opportunities that Tim Krul had to save, there was very, very little of that in the first half. And Norwich City have to take a massive amount of pride from that, because to limit the champions-elect to that, to scraps, and to really hold their own in the game was very positive. And that's not to be patronising, because there will be many teams who attempt to replicate what Norwich City have done today and will get picked apart. We've seen it several times this season. Norwich City held their own. They were combative. They wanted to battle. They wanted to go to war in certain areas, and that desire, that determination, that hunger to go and fight and take the game to Liverpool was evident to see. And in the second half, Liverpool tweaked a couple of things. They got Firmino a bit more into the game. They kept their wide players a bit wider to exploit where perhaps Cantwell was allowing space to open up. Cantwell, who I thought had a very good game, by the way. and equally on the other side as well with Rupp and Aarons. They just look to expose that a little bit. Obviously their fullbacks create overloads as well, and they create that through wide areas. Fabinho when he came on was a little bit deeper, and that allowed Henderson to push up and receive the ball on the half turn between the midfield and the defence, and that just allowed them to get the ball in dangerous areas, and they probably did benefit from that a lot better. Because in the first half it was very simplistic. They essentially tried to get Norwich to suck out of their defensive shape before Alexander-Arnold, Van Dijk, Gomez would hit a diagonal pass to the other fullback, who would then try and hit the byline and get across into the box. Very simplistic. It's just a case of how you stop that, and they did have joy of it in the first half, although translating those diagonal passes into clear-cut chances was proving difficult because of how compact Norwich were and how they protected their central areas, and Graham Hanley was massive for that, I felt, tonight, and Christoph Zimmermann as well didn't have a bad game, although we'll come on to him later with the Sadio Mane goal. Lucas Rupp will be kicking himself, had an opportunity in the first half. Probably VAR would have ruled it out had the German have found the back of the net, but just took a second of thought, and in that second of thought Alisson is on top of him. He tries to lay it off to Pukki and doesn't get enough weight on the pass, and Alisson reads it quite comfortably as well. The problem is with the way Norwich City played today in terms of that pragmatism, and Liverpool forced them to that because they did dominate the ball and they do have the quality to really dictate possession. But when you come up against that, it becomes incredibly difficult mentally to continue to go through the gears and continue to chase and continue to hustle in the same way, because it is mentally draining. It's tougher to play football without the ball, because you have to do the work, you have to cut off the lines, you have to go and press, you have to sit in, you have to mentally concentrate so much, and they put so much into this game, and they were 12 minutes 15 minutes away from becoming the second side this season to take points off Liverpool. That's a tremendous achievement for a side bottom of the league and who many people are writing off, and they've got to extract confidence from that, they've got to extract pride from that ultimately, because they had opportunities. Teti hit the post, they created 2v1s, they didn't perhaps execute the overloads in the way that Daniel Farke would have wanted, and you could maybe accuse them of having a bluntness in terms of their attacking threat, but you've got to praise what was on the pitch tonight, because it was a gutsy, resilient, determined performance. And yes, they ran out of steam, and yes, they lost to a side who have a 25-point cushion at the top of the Premier League, and yes, they lost to a side who could possibly go unbeaten in the Premier League this season. But for Norwich City, this was a performance that they had to take heart out of. And the thing is, when you play a side of this nature, you need everything. You need the stars to align to get a result, and they very nearly did. Had it not have been for a piece of quality from Sadio Mane, who of course was a substitute in the first half, it was a substitute. He's recovering from a hamstring injury, or coming back from a hamstring injury. When you can inject that little bit of quality onto the game, and he did stretch Norwich in wide areas, and he did allow Liverpool to counter press a bit more successfully and go on the counter attack and play in wide areas, and it was his bit of quality from a long pass, received the ball on the turn, and before Norwich know it, the ball's in the back of the net. Christoph Zimmermann tries to claim for a push, but for me, having seen it a couple of times, there's no contact, or very little contact, minimal contact. For me, Zimmermann has to command that. I think he probably lost the flight of the ball a little bit, whether that's the wind or the floodlights or whatever, but the excuses aren't there. Ultimately, it was a fantastic bit of control from Sadio Mane, a bit of quality in a game that probably lacked it for long periods, particularly in the final third. And he was ruthless as he is, and that was the difference. That was the moment. And I suppose from a Liverpool perspective, you would package this perhaps as a performance of title winners, a performance of champions, because for a lot, they probably were made to work harder than perhaps they anticipated coming to Carrow Road, and that's not calling them complacent. I think they have a self-confidence that is infectious, and the way they play is formidable. I mean, only Manchester United have taken points off them this season. That is incredible. That is an incredible statistic, to go 26 games unbeaten in any form, whether that's in the Premier League, in whatever. It's an unbelievable return that they've got, and Norwich City competed with that for lengthy periods. Alex Teti hit the post in the second half. Pukki had a shot that perhaps he snatched at in stoppage time a little bit, but he always had to hit it early because Virgil van Dijk was recovering But in terms of the patterns of play, in terms of the passages of play, they just couldn't perhaps progress the ball up in the same way that they would have hoped. But that is incredibly difficult when you haven't got Emi Buendia on the pitch, who is by far and away your most creative outlet. I mean, we saw from the 5 minutes that he was on the pitch that he created a really good opportunity, and he tried to make things happen. But ultimately, playing him would have sacrificed Lucas Rook, who gives you a bit more defensive protection. And with Liverpool's wing backs, as they effectively are, and how much quality they possess and their high positioning, I think Daniel Farkel's always going to edge towards that more pragmatic player, as opposed to perhaps deploying Emi Buendia in a role where perhaps you risk then a bit of positioning and getting caught out in the transition and whatnot. So, yeah, there you go. I think Norwich City will reflect on this in days to come with pride. They'll be disappointed tonight because they were in the game for lengthy periods. They ultimately, I think, fatigue got the better of them a little bit, certainly mentally. One bit of quality from Sadio Mane wins the game. Liverpool march on. It's a case of when, not if, they win the title now, isn't it? And who knows, they could go on to secure the European double, as well as still being in the FA Cup. It's scary how good this side is, and they could go on and break all sort of records and certainly become the best team in Premier League history. And Norwich City contained them for 78 minutes. So you've got to take pride out of that performance, I think, for whether that be supporters or players or staff. And look forward now to Wolves next Sunday. Of course, they play in the Europa League on Thursday, so maybe there's a possibility there that Norwich City can go and extract some points using that template. But we shall see. Anyway, I'm going to get inside because Storm Dennis is battering me as I stand in the snake pit in the aftermath. You may be able to see if I spin it. This pole might be in the way. There you go. Match of the day being filmed just down there. But there you go. That's my analysis of Norwich City's 1-0 defeat to Liverpool in the Premier League. Resilient, gutsy. Ultimately, Sadio Mane wins it.